Chapter 157, Launch of New Game 1. What did you just say? The moment Rowan spoke, everyone fell silent, even Kyle. Had he really just said that? Kyle blinked, struggling to process the words, unsure if he'd misheard or if Rowan had truly meant what he said. Don't play Seth's new game. Why would he say that? What sort of situation is this? Kyle opened his mouth to ask, but was beaten by someone else. Game? Wait, did you mention a game? Kalen stared at Rowan, instinctively covering his mouth. He, like the others, had assumed the situation was serious, especially with how much Rowan had been trembling, but he didn't mishear that, right? The reason why you're acting like this is because of a game. Kalen's lips began to tremble as he proceeded to cover them better. That. Feeling everyone's eyes on him, Rowan managed to regain a bit of composure. As he glanced around, especially at Kyle, Zoe, and the others he recognized, embarrassment began to creep in. Admittedly, the reason behind his behavior did sound utterly ridiculous. But, I'm's not lying. Rowan swallowed his saliva, trying his best to remain composed. That game, it's too much. I don't know what he did. It was like, it could read my thoughts. My mind also felt hazy and like I... Please. Kalen cut Rowan off mid-sentence. By now, he couldn't contain his laughter. I didn't really want to say much before because we were going into low-level gates, but this is starting to get ridiculous. He turned to look at Kyle and Zoe. I thought that this department was supposed to be good at handling scary stuff, and yet, you're telling me that one of your top prospects is acting like this because of a game. It's a horror game. A horror game. Kalen looked at Rowan with an even more ridiculous expression as he turned his attention towards the office. A horror game developed by someone who is supposed to be your therapist. For the briefest moment, a flicker of disdain crossed Kalen's face. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, but not quickly enough. Everyone present caught it. I'm rather disappointed. Kalen then turned his attention towards the office before shaking his head. For a brief moment, he thought about trying the game for himself, but decided not to bother. It was probably going to be a massive waste of time. Shaking his head again, he turned around and proceeded to leave. He had a lot more words to say, but decided to hold himself back. In the end, I expected too much. Following him from behind were the other members from the exchange program. Although they didn't say anything, they all wore similar expressions on their faces. Ava. Rowan stared at their departing backs and bit his lips. Turning his head to stare at Seth's office, alongside the others, his mouth instinctively opened. I am not lying. Hearing Rowan's voice, Kalen stopped for a brief moment. However, it was only for a brief moment before he proceeded forward. He had already lost most interest in most of the people in the department. From the way he saw things, this department wasn't necessary. Such thoughts only became more clear to him when he saw one of their more talented prospects get scared by a game. How ridicule. You will feel the same if you try the game for yourself. Not interested. But what if I bet fragments? HM. Kalen finally came to a halt, and he wasn't alone. One by one, the others stopped as well, a low murmur spreading through the group as they began whispering to one another. Wait, did he just say he wanted to bet several fragments? I didn't hear wrong, right? Is he crazy? Did his pride get wounded that much? Even Kyle, Zoe, and the others were shocked as they hastily turned to look at Rowan. What are you doing? Have you lost it? Seeing everyone staring at him with the same shocked, baffled expressions, Rowan clenched his teeth, his gaze shifting sharply toward Kalen. Of everyone present, he was the most vocal one. He was also the one who Rowan felt had the highest chances of accepting the bet. I am not joking. I will give you 5 fragments of your choice if you manage to play the game without showing any reaction. His words immediately started a commotion. However, Rowan was prepared. His thoughts drifted back to the game, the experience, the emotions, the creeping dread that clung to every moment of it. The more he remembered, the faster his heart pounded in his chest. It took everything he had not to start trembling all over again. Yes, this feeling of dread that I've rarely felt before. This isn't the wrong decision. I know I'm right. However, it appeared as though he was the only one who thought that way. Wait, Rowan, think about this carefully. Luke. Feeling a pair of hands grip his shoulders, Rowan looked up to find Kyle staring at him, his expression etched with deep concern. Don't take their provocation seriously. You don't need to do this. Fragments are not easy to come by. I know that you're going to break through soon. Don't waste your fragments on something like this. Just... I know. Rowan answered Kyle calmly, placing his hand over Kyle's wrist and pulling it away from his shoulder. I'm calm right now. I've never been calmer. While he had indeed fallen for their provocation, Rowan was confident. If a game could still leave him shaken even after several minutes had passed, he was sure that everyone else would also be shaken. Maybe not Kyle and Zoe since they've got a higher threshold. However, I'm at least confident that the people from the other departments will definitely feel the effect of the game. While Kaylin and the others were of similar strength to Zoe and Kyle, the main difference between them was that Zoe and Kyle had a much higher fear tolerance, working with anomalies all the time. Kaylin and the others, on the other hand, mainly brute forced their way into clearing the gates. If they were put in scenarios where brute force wouldn't help them, then Rowan was sure that they'd start to experience the same fear that he had experienced. No, they might suffer even more. Staring at them and seeing the way that they were looking at him and the others, Rowan's teeth clenched even further. There weren't many things he was confident in. However, at this very moment, he was confident in Seth's game. He was confident that it was going to traumatize them. As such, staring at Kaylin, he straightened his back. How about it, do you accept the bet? The surroundings fell quiet shortly after. All eyes alternated between Rowan and Kaylin. Kyle tried to say a few things to smooth the situation over, but it was no use. The situation had already escalated beyond control. Whatever Kyle tried to say, it went in deaf ears. And eventually, opening his mouth, Kaylin answered Rowan. I'm good. Huh? What? But the words that came out of his mouth left everyone stunned. Did he just reject the offer? What? Why? Those were free fragments. Of everyone present, Rowan was the most stunned. His mouth opened and closed several times, struggling to form words. Did he just get rejected? Seeing how everyone was looking at him, Kaylin shrugged his shoulders. 5 fragments aren't much for me. I've got no use for them. Plus, I've got better things to do than play some game. Yawning slightly, Kaylin looked at the others, and then Rowan before pulling his down and turning once more, leaving the place for good. From start to end, he looked completely disinterested in the game. Looking up towards the door and feeling a subtle commotion coming from that direction, I frowned. It was a little annoying. However, it was still less annoying than the current state of his room. In particular, his desk. Besides his laptop, almost everything had been thrown and tossed around the room. The chair was still on the floor, and there were visible cracks on the wooden surface of the desk. This is quite annoying indeed. And yet, even though I said that, I couldn't hold myself from smiling. Thinking about Rowan's reaction and the visible fear on his face when he played the game, I couldn't help but laugh to myself. Yes, this was the reaction that I wanted, the clear look of fear and despair. That was what I wanted to see. I had already been confident in my game, but now, I was even more confident than before as memories of Rowan's expression resurfaced in my mind. The reaction was everything that I wanted, and then some. I can take it that I've completed the game now. If it could scare someone like Rowan, then that meant that it could scare most people. This was exactly what I wanted. I'm sure this game will be a bigger hit than the previous game, but still, I need to properly market this game as well. Thankfully, I knew just the right person for that. Taking out my phone, I settled my gaze on a specific contact. I guess it's time you repaid me for the past. Why didn't you accept the offer? Those were easy fragments. Seralith asked as she stepped behind Kaylin, tucking a strand of her long platinum hair behind her ear. She couldn't quite understand the reason for Kaylin's sudden refusal to take on the bet. He didn't strike her as a person who would shy away from such an easy bet. In fact, he was rather famous for his opportunistic personality. Why did he reject such an easy bet? Seralith wasn't the only one who was wondering this. Everyone else was also wondering the same thing as they all stared at Kaylin's silent figure. Feeling everyone's gaze, Kaylin paused and turned back. Eventually, his eyes fell on Seralith. She once again spoke. You may have a lot of fragments, but 5 is still quite a lot. I don't take you as a person who can simply dismiss this amount. Why did you reject the bet? Kalen opened his mouth, but soon closed it as he smiled and shook his head. Like I said before, I've got better things to do. If you wanted to play the game, there was nothing to stop you from taking the bet in my stead. Serelith's brow furrowed further, but before she could say any other words, Kalen had already turned around and started moving again. As he walked, he thought about her words. Why did he reject the bet? The answer was rather simple. It's all some clever scheme. Kalen didn't think for 1 second that Rowan was the type of person who would simply propose a bet because he was offended by his words. He didn't strike Kalen as that stupid. In the end, there was some sort of scheme at play. If my guess is right, this was all just a setup to get me to play the game. They probably planned on planting some sort of item to make me lose the bet. Kalen wasn't naive enough to fall for such a trick. Why else would anyone try to propose such an obviously stupid bet? As if a game could scare him. Without a doubt, this was a trap designed to humiliate him in front of everyone. Laughing to himself, Kalen shook his head, as if he would fall for something so simple. Despite finding the situation rather amusing, the smile soon disappeared from his face. To think that they would resort to such a cheap trick. Kalen's eyes flashed coldly. You want me to play the game right? Don't worry, I'll certainly play it. Just that. It was going to be on his own terms. See if that'll do anything to me. Thank you everyone for watching today's stream. I will tune in with you guys tomorrow, and I hope you have a great day. See ya. Jamie reached out for the mouse and ended the stream. Click. Double-checking to make sure that the stream was indeed over, Jamie slumped back onto his chair as he sighed. He was both mentally and physically tired. Recently, due to a sudden surge in momentum for his account, he had been upping his streaming hours. If before he used to do about 6 hours of streams a day, he was now putting up double-digit numbers. The effort was starting to pay off. Staring at his peak view account 13,081, Jamie felt exhilarated. These were numbers he had only been dreaming of in the past. However, ever since the stream he had with Seth, the number of viewers that checked his channel had increased drastically. Who would have thought that a simple prank, meant to curry a favor with Zoe, would end up becoming one of the greatest blessings of my career? The best part of all of this, he had yet to be promoted by Zoe. Jamie knew that the moment Zoe promoted his stream, his numbers would skyrocket even further. He was just one text message away from potentially breaking into the top 100 streamers of Malavia. The thought tempted him to no end, oftentimes causing him to check out his phone repeatedly. But not yet. Still, Jamie held himself back. He knew that the time was not ripe yet. While his numbers had indeed gone up, his streams hadn't improved much in quality. He knew that if things continued like this, his upward trending momentum was going to fall, and he'd just be back to where he was. Fortunately, with the added income, he was able to improve the quality of his streams a little bit. But only a little bit. He still had a lot of work to do. HM. Receiving a sudden notification, Jamie turned his head to look at his phone, where he saw a message suddenly appear. He didn't pay much attention to the message at first, but the moment he saw the person who contacted him, his expression changed. He hurriedly sat up straight and picked up the phone. Before he even had the chance to properly read the message, he saw a call notification, and he quickly answered. Yo, I need a favor. He didn't even give Jamie the chance to greet him before Seth cut to the chase. Favor? Jamie blinked his eyes a couple of times before sinking back onto his chair. His mind churned with all sorts of thoughts before realization dawned on him. You developed a new game. Yes. Hi. Jamie wasn't even surprised by the sudden piece of news. Seth had been rather quiet as of late. He had been wondering what he had been up to. Following the success of the first game, he had been wondering when the next game was going to be released. Looks like the game is finally ready. You're calling me because you need me to help you promote the game. Oh yes. Jamie nodded. He somewhat expected this to happen. However, I can't help you directly since I specialize in other things, but I can connect you with someone that I know who can promote the game. How is that? That is fine, so long as they can help promote the game. Don't worry, you can leave that to me, I know just the right person. Jamie patted his chest confidently. It was also in that moment that he thought about something, and his expression stiffened slightly. Wait, now that I think about it, is your game scarier than your previous one? Yes, why? Oh, that's a relief. Jamie's face eased a little. Actually, I was thinking of introducing you to someone who is not exactly normal. They actually used to be a part of a guild, mainly operated in gates, and so their tolerance for scary stuff is quite high. If your game isn't as scary as your previous one, then there's no need for that. Seth's voice calmly echoed through the phone. The game is definitely scarier than the previous one. It should have no problem scaring most people, even someone who used to be a part of a guild. Jamie raised his brow. That confident? There didn't seem to be any ounce of doubt in Seth's voice as he spoke about his game. This made Jamie smile. All right then, if you're that confident, then I'll get in contact with my friend. Let's see if we can make something work. I will send you the game file over. Okay, send it over. I'll get in contact with him now. I'll message you when I'm done. Pulling the phone away, Jamie scrolled through his contacts before settling his gaze on a certain contact. He didn't hesitate to press call a short moment later. If he isn't lying about his game, then this should benefit both of them. Doerp. A lazy figure sat within the confines of a small room, his legs resting on his desk, as all sorts of trash littered the ground. Scratching his stubble, Idris Diamantes quietly sipped on his beer as he scrolled through his phone. This month's statistics aren't too bad. I should be able to make quite a bit of money. While I won't be able to enter the top 100 streamers, I shouldn't be too far off. As a retired containment expert of the Second Order, Idris was fairly skilled. Had he not picked up an injury during one of his expeditions, he probably wouldn't have retired. It was an unfortunate circumstance that pushed him towards content creation. Now, he streamed regularly and produced videos for his growing fanbase, dabbling in everything from gaming to commentary and whatever trends caught his eye. Even so, as of right now, his career had started to stagnate. While the revenue was good, his growth had completely stalled. He was seeing no new influx of viewers tuning in on his channel. This was usually not a very good thing, since this meant that he could only lose viewers and not gain them. In short, if he didn't do something quickly, then there was a good chance that his views would start to sink. But what exactly can I even do? There was nothing interesting happening as of late. Be it tournaments or games, there was nothing that was particularly interesting or trend-worthy. Idris was currently stuck in a limbo. Biting his nails, Idris was just about to make a quick call when he suddenly received a message. Jamie. Opening up the message, Idris's expression turned strange. What though? The message was simple. Play the game and make a video of it. You can thank me later. Looking down, he also saw a file attached to the message. The name of the file was Game Proxy 1. Wait, what? Idris immediately tried to call Jamie, but his call was immediately brought to voicemail. This left him utterly lost and confused. Why was he not answering, and what even was this game? Has he lost it or something? Idris scratched the side of his cheek before looking at the file again. Curious, he loaded the game onto his computer and started it. Soon, a plain interface appeared before his very eyes. Later. Calling it plain was an understatement. Looking at the lazily made interface that only had several lines written, Idris's face fell as he immediately went on to grab his phone and texted Jamie. What is this? He didn't have to wait long for a reply. It's a horror game. Oh. But the answer that he received from Jamie made his face twist. A horror game? Is this a joke? Was Jamie not aware of the fact that he was of the Second Order, that he was experienced in handling scary situations? Why in the world was he trying to get him to play the game? Yes, this must be a joke. Haha, very funny. I take it that you were lonely. Is that why you're suddenly texting me this nonsense? Idris shook his head as he wrote the message. Thinking about it, this was how Jamie usually was. He was the type of person to make these kinds of jokes. A horror game. Idris felt like laughing. He began typing another message to Jamie. Next time you want to prank me, at least give the game a name and a proper interface. This is just too las. It's not a joke, play the game. Idris's fingers stopped as his brows furrowed tightly. Not a joke. Now he was really starting to get annoyed as he shifted his attention back towards the plain interface. The more he looked at it, the more annoyed he got. Ding! Another message came. Have you heard of A Regular Day in the Office? It's made by the same guy. What, that shit game? Idris was, of course, aware of the game. How could he not? The game had been trending for a short month. He even gave it a chance due to the few newspapers that mentioned the disturbance the game caused by the screams it caused. Curious, Idris also tried the game. But, shit beyond shit. The game was one of the most boring games he had ever played in his life. Whatever video he had been planning on making, he had to quickly scrap it. He even went as far as asking for a refund, but was promptly rejected, causing him to waste $5 on the game. In his opinion, they were $5 too many. Wait, you're telling me that this game is created by the same one that created that garbage? Idris shifted his attention towards the interface once more and leaned back on his chair, his face turning strange. So now I have even more reason not to play this game. Taking aside the fact that he was of the second order, given how shit the previous game developed by this guy was, Idris was even more certain that this one was going to be just as shit, if not worse. Chuckling, Idris texted Jamie. If it's made by the same guy, then I have less reason to play it. I've got stuff to do, so if you don't have anything else to say, I'll go. Sending the message, Idris shook his head before tossing his phone onto the bed. Dings ding. His phone continued to buzz even as he threw it, but Idris ignored it. He was done listening to Jamie's nonsense. Letting out a small yawn, Idris reached for his mouse, intending to quit the game, but just as his fingers brushed against it, he accidentally pressed onto the left side of the mouse. Click! With the cursor hovering over the Start button, the interface changed the moment he left clicked. Ah, shit. Annoyed, Idris frowned and moved the mouse around in order to quit the game. However, right as he started doing that, the game loaded. Immediately, the screen shifted to reveal a small room with a checkered marble floor, a long flight of wooden stairs leading upward, and several open doors lining the walls, whatever was behind them hidden by a deep and foreboding darkness. An extremely dim lighting enshrouded the space, adding a sense of mystery and grimness to the surroundings. Idris paused the moment he saw the sight. The graphics. They were actually not bad at all. While it wasn't anywhere near most modern games, it was actually quite passable. But that was just about it. The graphics were great, but it was still not enough to grab his attention. At least that was the case until a sudden light flared to life, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing from one of the far-off doors. A circular dot of light suddenly appeared behind the darkness that enshrouded the doors in the distance, hovering in the air. It expanded slowly, growing brighter with each echoing footstep that crept closer. Tug, tug. The steps were slow, but at the same time rhythmic. Closer and closer they came, the expanding light dragging a glare across the screen like a searchlight sweeping through the dark. It stopped just inches away from the main screen, making it hard to see. Then, the light pulled down, revealing the face of an elderly woman with hollow eyes. "Ars, you're here." Idris held his breath. Idris's brow knitted instinctively as the old lady's face filled the screen. Every detail stood out to him. The deep lines etched into her skin, the emptiness in her hollow, faintly blue eyes, and the mole that rested right beneath her right eye. Her appearance was enough to jolt Idris out of his lethargic state of mind as he stared at the old lady on the screen. They sure didn't skimp out on her design. Every detail of the old lady seemed meticulously crafted, adding a certain sense of realism to the scenario as the old lady once again spoke. "I thought you wouldn't have come, officer." "Officer." The camera panned down, displaying a police uniform before eventually panning back up towards the old lady, who had moved back a few steps. Her hand was raised to display a small lamp. "I have been waiting quite a while. I was starting to get impatient." Her lips slowly pulled up to reveal her toothless smile, and Idris smirked. Are they making her as ugly as possible? What a cheap trick to add horror. He shook his head. He was already starting to lose interest in the game. No, in fact, why was he even playing it? He was supposed to quit the game. How did he end up playing it? It hasn't been long since my husband disappeared. Perhaps you might be able to find some clues if you look inside. I am happy to be of your assistance. The old lady then proceeded to move to the side, holding onto the lamp to light up the dimly lit surroundings even more. A series of basic commands appeared shortly after. W forward. A left. D right. S back. Left click pick up. HM rather simple commands. Just one look and Idris was able to tell that the mechanics were quite simple. This made his frown deepen. I can't even fight or do anything else. What am I even supposed to do? He shook his head. He didn't even feel like critiquing the game any further. Moving the mouse and looking around the place, his gaze once again fell on the old lady who stood by the side, smiling quietly. Seeing as she isn't talking anymore, her role is done. Idris more or less already had an idea of what he needed to do. In essence, he had to find clues regarding the old lady's husband. Something must have happened to him, and as an officer, he came to investigate the situation. This appeared to be the background of the game. I guess that's all. He moved the mouse and looked around before approaching the old lady once more. He left-clicked and she smiled. Officer, would you like my help? Feel free to ask me when you need. The interaction ended there. I guess it's safe to say that she's just here for the atmosphere and the info dump. Idris drummed his finger over the table before shaking his head. I've already had enough of this game. He wasn't interested before, and he wasn't interested now. Why in the world would Jamie tell me to play this? Maybe it scared him, and he thought it would scare me. But just the thought made him frown. Did Jamie really think that just because he hung around haunted places, his tolerance would be the same as his? That's ridiculous. Idris didn't even know whether to feel mad or annoyed. He was feeling a mix of both, and just as he was about to shut the game for good, a sudden tune filled the air. HM. It was soft, and yet, the moment that Idris heard it, it almost felt as though the thoughts in his mind faded. Later. It took a moment for Idris to snap out of it, and when he did, he was shocked to see that his hand was pressed onto the mouse, while his fingers were on the keyboard, moving the character towards one of the open doors in the distance. What's going on? Idris hastily pulled his hands back, staring at the keyboard in front of him with a deep frown. Covering his mouth, he looked towards the beer that was resting on the table. Did I drink too much? Am I that drunk? Wasn't he just about to quit the game? Why did he suddenly start playing the game? And why in the world is my heart beating? Pressing his hand against his chest, Idris felt it, his own beating heart. It was beating at a beat that was way above the norm. Idris sat upright as his frown deepened, and his gaze turned towards the game once more. More specifically, towards the open door before him, as all he could see was the darkness that stood on the other side. A gentle tune played in the air as, for some reason, he found himself swallowing his saliva. What? It was that simple action that caused him to be taken aback. Staring at the door and then his hands, which were slightly sweating, his face started to contort. I'm drunk, aren't I? The thought that he was scared never crossed his mind once. In his mind, it was impossible for him to be scared of this game. He had to be drunk. That was the only possible explanation for his weird reactions. And that tune. It's annoying, how do I turn it off? Idris pressed the ESC button and tried to look at the settings, but no matter how he looked, he couldn't deactivate the music. The hell, what sort of game won't allow me to turn off the music? While he could turn off all sound, all he wanted to do was turn off the music and nothing else. For whatever reason, the music was making him unsettled. However, it was clear that the game wouldn't allow him to do so. This really is a shit game. Clicking his tongue, Idris took a deep breath before looking at the door once again. He had previously wanted to quit the game, but now things were a little bit different. He was actually quite annoyed. Jamie wants me to make a video, right? Fine. His lips curled upwards as he brought his hands onto the keyboard and mouse again. I'll do the review, it's just that, it won't be one where I'll be very nice. Kirk. Without wasting a single second, Idris reached towards the top of his computer and activated the camera. Seeing the green dot flash, he suddenly smiled. Yo, how y'all doing? He moved the mouse left and right. Welcome back to my channel. As you all can see, I'm playing a new game. What was it called again? Idris thought for a moment before recalling that the game didn't have a name and rolled his eyes. Never mind, it doesn't have a name yet. I guess you can say it's a prototype. An exclusive prototype that you will only get to see on my channel, Cuck. Taking a sip of his beer, he continued. Anyways, from what I heard, this game is made by the same guy who made the recent Office horror game. As you can see, the graphics have improved since then, but that's about it. Do you think the game can scare me? Idris laughed while slamming the can down. Bang! What a joke, I got bored with that game in the first minute. The same can be said for this one. Clicking his tongue, Idris pressed the W key and proceeded forward. Let's see if the developer improved since the last game. Did he get better or did he regress? No, wait, can you even regress from the bottom? Okay, it looks like we have many choices. There are several doors that we can enter, each most likely containing a certain clue to the elderly lady's husband. My best guess is that each door will pose some sort of challenge, with the fear factor increasing with each subsequent room that we enter. Entering the room, Idris started to narrate. As an experienced gamer and as someone who had experience in anomalous gates, he was quite aware of the current setup. To him, this was child's play. Okay, the first door looks like it will lead us directly to the kitchen. Idris guided the cursor slowly across the screen, eyes fixed on the scene unfolding. The room was steeped in shadows, lit only by a single flickering bulb that swayed gently from a frayed cord above. The white marble tiles on the floor were cracked and discolored, like bones left too long in the dark. A plain gas stove loomed in the corner, while the open cabinets above creaked slightly, revealing their empty insides. Creak! The sound filtered into Idris's room as he raised his brow. This place is rather well designed, but I wouldn't say this is quite realistic. This place doesn't seem to have been used in quite a long time, and we're all aware of the fact that the old lady lives here. See, look. Idris pointed towards a certain area where he noticed dust and spiderwebs. He shook his head. The programmer is clearly trying too hard to make the atmosphere look scary. However, one needs to take into account realism while doing so, otherwise, it'll just feel forced. Licking his lips, Idris continued to look around, criticizing any little thing that he saw. Taking into account his annoyance, he didn't hold back at all. He was brutally honest with everything that he said, ripping the game apart. There's also a subtle lag that I feel when moving the character. This dampens the experience quite a little. Then again, I didn't expect much to begin with. This was made after all by an amateur in the space. However, it is still a step up compared to his previous game, so I'll give him his flow, HM. Pausing for a moment, Idris moved the cursor as he suddenly spotted something. His brows furrowed as he moved the character forward. What though? It was right at the gap between the cupboard and the stove that he noticed faint markings on the wall. He wasn't able to spot them at first due to the faint lighting, but coming closer, he finally managed to see them. His brows jumped up the moment he saw the marking. It was a downward arrow. Wait. Idris frowned in confusion, but as he looked closer, he noticed the arrow was aimed precisely at the narrow gap beside the stove. With a hesitant nudge, he moved the character forward. The shadows shifted, and just beyond the edge of the appliance, something caught his eye. Something small, partially obscured, lying motionless on the cold tile floor. A paper. Idris dragged the cursor over the paper, and the paper faded from the spot, appearing right into his character's hands. Alongside the action was a faint dragging sound, most likely put there to indicate that the character had moved the stove forward to get the paper. Idris didn't think too much of it and stared at the paper. I think she is hiding something from me. A lover, I don't know, she just doesn't allow me to enter that room. She says that it was her ex-husband's room. I'm not sure, she won't allow me in. It smells horrible in there. Should I divorce her? Idris frowned, his fingers brushing against the keys as he stared at the message. Some family dispute. Well, it does look like the husband is suspecting her of cheating. There's also something about her ex-husband's room. some sort of jealousy at play. Idris's mind started to churn. All sorts of possibilities and scenarios started to formulate in his mind. Looking at our current situation, this seems to be a horror mystery game. We're supposed to figure out clues regarding the husband's disappearance, and looking at the letter, our goal should be to go to the ex-husband room. The old lady also appears to be suspicious. Let's be careful of her. As he said these words, Idris didn't even realize that his tone had grown a lot more serious than before. Unconsciously, he started to treat the game more seriously. This was something that he himself had yet to notice as he looked around the kitchen for any more clues before coming back out. It doesn't look like there's anything else here. Let's go back out. Moving out of the kitchen, Idris's gaze fell on the lady. She still appeared where she had left him before, her toothless smile and hollow eyes directed his way. Have you found anything? I can help you whenever you'd like. My husband was a very good man, although he did become quite sick as of late. I wish he had taken his medicine that day. Listening to the old lady's words, Idris clicked his tongue. This game. The fact that he couldn't actually interact with the old lady annoyed him. Otherwise, he would have been able to ask her where the ex-husband's room was. In the end, shaking his head, he moved towards the other room that was on the same floor. The room stretched out before him, far larger than the cramped kitchen, its space cluttered with worn sofas, tattered carpets, and faded paintings hanging crookedly on the walls. But despite its size, dust coated every surface, thick and suffocating, as if the place hadn't seen a cleaning in years. Whim! The moment Idris took a good look at his surroundings, a certain tune began to play in the air, causing Idris's brow to jump up. He guided the mouse toward the source of the faint music, his eyes soon landing on the old record player, positioned beside a weathered wooden table. The record spun in eerie silence, emitting only a thin, creaky sound. Idris swallowed upon staring at the record player, moving the character forward as he stopped right before it, yet again noticing a strange arrow etched on the table, pointing towards the record. Idris left-clicked and the record disappeared, displaying another letter. The doctors say that I'm sick. I think I've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I can't remember things really well these days. What was I even so on edge about? Right, something about her ex, I am not sure. I am starting to see things these days. It all calms down whenever I close my eyes. Could it be because of my sickness? I wish I got better. Later. The frown on Idris's face deepened as he read this letter. He started to piece the two letters together, and new scenarios started to emerge in his mind. Could it be that rather than having Alzheimer, he got poisoned by the old lady? The more I think about it, the more I feel like there's something up with the old lady. Maybe the ex-husband is still alive, and colluding with her to do something to this guy. The more Idris thought about it, the more he felt that this was the case. Are you sure it could just be a simple case of Alzheimer? He disappeared after leaving, forgetting the road back. Yes, that could also be the case, but I don't think it's that simple. It's never that simple. You think so? Yay! Idris's eyes shot up in shock as his hands let go of the keyboard and mouse, and he moved back, staring at the screen with wide eyes as he hastily looked around. His gaze flicked to the corner of the room, and there she was, an old woman, standing unnervingly close, her frail hands gripping a tarnished lamp. She was watching him, her smile thin and unsettling, her gaze lingering over him as though she could actually see and hear him. Not the game character, but him. Idris's body tensed as he looked at her, lowering his gaze to stare at his hand. It was there that he realized. His hand. It was trembling. Blankly staring at the old lady on the screen, Idris found himself licking his own lips as he tried his best to remain calm. However, that quickly proved to be a difficult task as he took several deep breaths. Staring at the smiling old lady on the screen, her hollow eyes focused on him, Idris's lips parted as he asked, "Hello, can you hear me?" In that brief moment, it almost felt as though the old lady had heard his words and was quietly talking with him. Goosebumps. Idris felt goosebumps in that moment. However, he was quick to recover as he adjusted himself back properly in the seat and looked at the camera that was pointed at him. I'm sorry about that, you guys saw that too, right? Haha, it almost felt as though the old lady was talking to me. I was a little taken aback by that. What a stupid coincidence. Idris shook his head, turning his attention back towards the screen. As he did, his brows furrowed unconsciously. Thinking about it, even if it was some freak coincidence, I shouldn't have been this startled. I've encountered far scarier things in the past. I'm not usually this jumpy. Am I getting rusty? Idris scratched the back of his head. However, he eventually shook his head and proceeded with the game. Looking at the old lady who didn't seem like she could talk again, Idris took a silent breath before moving out of the room and onto the next one. Kriak. As he entered the next room, he immediately noticed a big difference in the new room. The moment he stepped in, he heard a faint creaking sound coming from the distance, and the lighting appeared to be even dimmer than it was before. It was so dim that Idris had no choice but to squint his eyes in order to get a better look at the surroundings, and the moment he did, he immediately noticed that he was standing in what appeared to be a bathroom. Creak, creak. The creaking sound continued, forcing Idris to lift the cursor upward. There, a broken cupboard hung by the side of the wall, the door swaying slowly from side to side. Tuo. Idris let out a small breath. By now, Idris was extremely focused, so much so that he even forgot about the video and calmly assessed the situation around. His entire body was tense and his eyes were alert. At this very moment, he had completely forgotten that this was a game. Creak. As the creaking persisted, Idris tapped the W key as carefully and delicately as possible, inching the character forward. The room ahead was in worse condition than the previous ones. Shattered tiles lined the floor, crunching softly with each step. The shower curtains hung in tatters, discolored and swaying slightly despite the still air. And then there was the bathtub. A massive porcelain husk, splintered with deep cracks. Dark stains clung to the edges, and from within the basin, a slow drip echoed. Tap, tap, tap. Idris leaned in, squinting. The creaking stopped, and for whatever reason, sitting in his own seat, Idris hesitated. Move forward or not, look into the bathtub, or... Wait, what am I even doing? Snapping out of it, Idris's expression changed as he looked at the screen in front of him. Why was he even hesitating so much? This was just a game. It wasn't real. Shifting his attention towards the beer on the table, he grabbed it. Did I drink too much? Thinking about it, that was probably the case. Why else would he be acting like this? Tusk. Clicking his tongue, Idris tossed the can into the trash and moved the character forward, inching it closer to the bathtub to see what was inside. Ha, so it's nothing. A smirk played on his lips the moment he saw that there was nothing. In the end, he really was too drunk. For a moment, he thought that something would show up in the bathtub. Well, there doesn't seem to be anything, I guess. I'm supposed to look for the arrow, right? Idris moved away from the bathtub and started looking elsewhere. Because of how hard the surroundings were, it became quite difficult for him to find the small arrow. For fuck's sake, who was the genius who decided to make it so dark? Growing irritated, Idris moved towards the sink and started to move the cursor around, clicking randomly as he tried to find whatever clue was hidden before him. However, regardless of how hard he tried, he found that he couldn't find a single thing at all. Shit and fuck. Growing even more frustrated, Idris scratched the side of his neck before bringing the mouse up, meeting the broken mirror that sat right above the sink. This is starting to. Halfway through his words, his expression changed, and his heart nearly leaped out of his chest as he caught a glimpse of a tall shadow looming right behind him. His hand twitched as he hastily jerked the mouse back, but when the screen shifted, he froze. There was nothing behind him. I swear I saw something. Turning his attention back towards the mirror, the only thing he saw was the broken reflection of the game character. Idris frowned, but soon turned to look at the camera. I don't think I saw wrong. This could just be some sort of trick by the game. Anyways, what am I supposed to do now? Looking around, I can't seem to find anything. Click, click, click. Clicking everywhere, Idris looked at the camera again. See, I don't get anything regardless of where I click. Am I missing something, or is the game glitching? Well, considering how this was made by one person, then Idris's movements came to an abrupt halt as he stared at the mirror once again. This time, his expression changed. What? Unconsciously, his breath paused as he stared at the red letters etched into the mirror. They looked freshly written, the blood still sliding down the cracked glass. Something is definitely up. I don't remember, my brain is foggy. I can hardly think, it hurts so much. It hurts, but... Whatever you do, don't look. Don't look. Reading the contents of the message, he felt it. Thump. The sudden shift in the atmosphere. Don't look, what am I supposed to not look at? Idias grew more concerned as he hastily looked around. However, as he did, he saw nothing. In the end, he turned his attention towards the door. I've already found the message, so I should get out of here, right? Idris didn't waste a single second. He hurried the character out of the room and made his way back into the main area. However, the moment he did, he stopped as his expression tensed. Why is it so dark? Looking around, the place was a lot darker than it was before. He could hardly see a thing, and even as he increased the brightness to the max, he struggled to see the path ahead. That was until... Swoosh! A dim light cast behind him as an aged face appeared over the stairs that led to the second floor. Oh dear! Her hollow eyes focused on Idris as she raised the lamp. It appears that the lights need replacing. I also see that you're done with the first floor. Why don't you come up? It should be brighter up here. Idris licked his lips at the sound of the old lady's voice. The longer he stared at her, the more something felt wrong, but as he looked around, it became clear. He didn't really have much of a choice. With a hesitant hand, he moved the character forward. The avatar climbed the stairs, each step releasing a faint groan that echoed through his laptop speakers, dragging a sense of unease behind every creak. In order to ease the tension, he looked at the camera and began speaking. So it looks like the next part of the game is about to start. The first floor was probably just an introduction to get the player familiar with the situation and learn more about the husband. Basically, it was setting the tone and building the atmosphere. If I'm right, this is where the real game begins. Taking a few deep breaths to calm himself down, Idris smiled. If so, I'm ready. Oh, I'm glad you're ready. Idris's expression shifted as his head snapped toward the old lady, the breath leaving his lungs all at once. That's. Maybe he could dismiss it the first time, but a second time. That couldn't be a coincidence. Is it possible that she can listen to my words? No, but how was that possible? Idris shuddered at the thought. His eyes locked onto the old lady, her face looming just inches from the screen. His lips trembled faintly. But then, you look really excited, officer. I really do hope you find something. With a smile, the old lady stepped to the side, illuminating the next room. Please. She nudged toward the door, and as Idris followed her gaze, his expression froze completely. Then, his entire body tensed. Standing just beyond was a tall, lanky black figure, looming in the shadows. It wore a tattered top hat, tilted at an unnatural angle. Its head was swallowed by shadow, hiding whatever lay beneath. That's when Idris felt it. Bars thump. His own rapidly beating heart. Bars thump. Catching a glimpse of the tall figure by the door, Idris felt his blood run cold. Idris's years as a containment agent kicked in all of a sudden. As if recalling the words he had seen in the bathroom, whatever you do, don't look. His hands snapped down, dragging the cursor away from the figure without thinking. The surroundings fell silent, besides the heavy breathing coming from Idris, as he took a moment to process the situation. Why did I react like that? Why am I acting like this? What is going on? Idris's leg tapped rapidly against the ground, something he usually did whenever he was stressed and nervous. This is just a game. Why am I reacting like this? I shouldn't be reacting like this. The more Idris thought about it, the more he realized that something was wrong. However, the moment he lifted his head in real life, the only thing he could focus on was the monitor in front of him. It was as if the only thing that existed was the game in front of him, as his surroundings started to twist and curl. Clutching tightly onto the mouse, Idris slowly moved the cursor up to stare at the door once again. Gone, it's gone. The figure that had been present before was completely gone. The only one that still remained was the old lady, as she looked at him with the same toothless smile of hers as she cocked her head and asked, "Is something wrong?" Idris found his lips opening on their own as he answered back. No, it's fine." That's good. By now, Idris had long forgotten about the peculiar lady, who seemed to be able to interact with him. At this very moment, he was immersed in the game. So immersed that he forgot all about the fact that it was one. "I'll be leaving now." The old lady pulled the lamp back as the wooden floor creaked under her steps, and she began moving towards another room. "Best of luck, I will be looking for a way to repair the lights." Creak, creak, creak. The creaking grew more distant until it completely faded. By the time they were gone, a heavy silence filled the surroundings as Idris continued to stare at the door in front of him. He stood like that for what felt like forever. However, this didn't persist for long as he clenched his teeth, and he moved towards the door, finally entering it to reveal a large bedroom. The lights were dim, but it was much easier for him to see as the bedroom looked to be in better condition than the areas beneath. In fact, it was spotless. The white sheets were spotless, the wooden floor free of dust, and the entire bedroom appeared well maintained. Idris's brows furrowed at the sight as he paused for a moment, taking in the surroundings in confusion. Why is this place clean and the others aren't? Is this something that only happens on the second floor? Could this be because this is the old lady's room? Thinking about it, it made sense. The old woman was quite elderly and likely didn't have the energy to maintain such a large house. She probably only kept the areas she used in good condition. Taking a deep breath, Idris calmed himself down and started looking around the place. If my guess isn't wrong, I should be able to find another paper inside here. By now, he had completely forgotten about the fact that he was recording himself. The only thing in his view was the screen in front of him as he moved the character around, trying his best to look for clues. As he did, his mouse eventually hovered over the drawer beside the bed. Pausing, Idris moved toward it, his eyes drifting to the wooden frame resting just above it, along with the small lamp perched beside it. A picture. He couldn't quite see what was in the frame since it was a little dusty. Positioning the cursor over the frame, he clicked and picked it up as it appeared before him. Only when it was close did he manage to see through the layer of dust and smudges clouding the glass. A young girl and a man. Looking at the frame, he was able to see a young man standing next to a young girl in front of a house. The two of them were both posing together as they looked directly at the camera. Overall, it looked like a regular picture. However, for some reason, Idris felt his gaze wander towards the man's clothing, a grey suit and a grey top hat. For whatever reason, staring at the clothing, he felt his heart race. But why? Why was his heart pounding over something so simple? Idris's thoughts spiraled for several seconds, until in the corner of the image, in a patch of glass just clean enough to reflect, he caught the shadow of what looked like a top hat looming behind him. His hand nearly jerked back at the sudden sight of the top hat, and he barely managed to suppress a gasp as he kept the mouse frozen in place. "Whatever you do, don't look, don't look." The words from before replayed in his mind, over and over again. Hi. Idris's breath was heavy as he remained rooted in place, his mind and thoughts coming to a freezing halt as he came to a sudden realization. Something was standing right behind him. Sweat formed at the palms of his hands as he tried to maintain his composure. "Calm down, I've encountered similar situations before. I just don't have to look. That's all I have to do. I don't have to low." Creak. Hearing the floor creak, Idris's body tensed as he hastily pulled his gaze away from the frame and lowered his eyes to stare at the ground. It was also in that moment that he caught sight of a pair of leather shoes, moving carefully in front of him. "It's really here." Idris's pulse quickened. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. He was starting to panic. However, even though he was panicked, he was still rational enough to understand his current position. So long as he continued to stare at the ground, he was safe. "I believe the main goal of entering this room is to find the picture." A lot of things started to set in Idris's mind, from the picture to the pristineness of the room. Without a doubt, the figure that was standing right before him was the same man in the picture. Most likely, he was the ex-husband. The reason why the room had been so tidy wasn't because the old lady lived in it, but because he lived in it. He needed to get out of the room as quickly as possible and head onto the next. Idris could feel it. The escalating tension of the game as he turned the character around and moved ahead, his head continuously lowered. As he moved, he felt the entity that had been standing behind him remain where it was. Idris breathed a sigh of relief. Yes. All I have to do is just keep looking down. Coming out of the room, Idris felt a lot more relaxed. In hindsight, so long as he kept his head down, he wouldn't need to worry about the figure that was chasing him. Subtly moving the cursor up, Idris stared towards the next door and began to move forward again. He kept the cursor low enough that he could see the door, and he felt much more at ease as he did so. In fact, he felt quite confident. The more he thought about it, the easier he felt that the situation was. The main issue is that I can't look up too often since there's a risk that I might end up seeing the figure again, but that's not really a big problem. I can just look up quickly before looking down again. Idris planned on doing this in quick bursts that would allow him to see what was ahead before looking down again. So long as he stuck to the plan, he thought that he'd be able to clear the situation rather easily. However, the moment he stepped into the next room, that fragile sense of control shattered. There, sprawled across the floor in thick, smeared red, were the words, "Everything is a lie. I am not sick, they are sick. They try to trick me, they trick me through sight and sound. Run! Hey!" His breath caught. "Hey!" His voice came out weak, almost as if afraid of being heard. He froze in place, and for a moment nothing moved, until he heard it. Creak. A soft, drawn-out creaking, like weight shifting on old wood. It came from directly behind him. A chill stabbed down his spine, and every muscle in his body locked up. His fingers tightened around the mouse. Then came the voice. "Oh, you're here, did you find anything?" It was the old lady. Almost instinctively, Idris turned in the direction of the voice, but all of his experience came rushing through in that moment as he stopped dead in his tracks. That voice, was it really the old lady's? Ava. That was when it truly hit him. The fear. Who is it? Idris's lips were dry, his breath unsteady as he clutched the mouse with such force that it let out a faint, plastic creak beneath his fingers. A shadow began to stretch beneath the character on the screen, lengthening slowly before his eyes, and with it, a tremor ran through Idris's entire body. His mind started to swirl with all sorts of thoughts as he struggled to grasp his current situation. "Officer." Hearing the old woman's voice again, Idris felt the urge to turn toward it. But could he? The warning from the previous room echoed in his mind, the words printing themselves before his very vision. "They try to trick me, they trick me through sight and sound. Run!" It was a warning. A warning that described the current situation properly. Idris's body trembled harder, each breath coming out more ragged than the last. His eyes darted frantically across the screen, scanning every corner in search of a clue, anything that could explain what was happening or tell him what to do next. At the same time, he constantly reminded himself to stick to his plan. "I don't have to turn around, I shouldn't look at anything. So long as I don't look at anything, then I don't have to worry about getting tricked." Taking a couple of more breaths to calm himself, Idris moved ahead with the game. "Officer, why are you not responding to me? Is something wrong? Did you figure something out?" The old woman's voice echoed steadily behind him, each word soft and brittle, but Idris refused to acknowledge it, forcing himself to focus entirely on the screen and the task in front of him. It's very clear that there's a message in each room. This is the second to last room before going to the final room, and if my estimates are correct, then the door will most likely be locked. In that case, the goal should be to find the next message and find the key that will lead me to open up the last door. Each floor was comprised of 3 rooms, from what Idris managed to observe. The goal of each room was to find the letters and writing, with the game growing progressively more tense with each clue found. He was just 2 rooms away from clearing the game. He had to hold steady. Now, where could the next message be? It's right underneath the bed. Hearing the old lady's voice, which seemed to be able to read his thoughts, Idris's hand shook further as his breathing, which he had managed to steady a few moments prior, suddenly became more erratic. "The message that you're looking for is right underneath the bed." Idris slowly dragged the mouse across the screen until the leg of the bed came into view. From what little he could see, it looked like he was in yet another bedroom. His throat tightened as he swallowed, placing the cursor over the bed's leg. The moment he did, every sound vanished. It felt as if the entire room were holding its breath, and with it, so was he. A suffocating tension gripped the air shortly after that as his finger lifted and he prepared to click the mouse. However, right as he was about to do so, he stopped. No, wait, this could also be a trap. Why else would the old lady so blatantly tell him to check the bed? This was obviously a trap. Yes, it had to be a trap. Idris quickly pulled the cursor away, no longer daring to look at the bed. As soon as he did, the oppressive silence shattered, replaced by the low, rasping sound of breathing that echoed across the screen. It seemed to come from right, behind him. Ho! Idris's face turned pale as he fought to maintain his grip on the mouse, his fingers slipping slightly from the sweat. With a shaky breath, he pulled his hand away and clenched it into a tight fist, the pressure helping to squeeze out the moisture as he tried to steady himself. This is just a game, this is just a game, this is just a game. He had to remind himself over and over again that all of this was fake in order to keep his mind steady, as he once again had to remind himself that this was just a game. A very twisted game. One that played with the player's mind. 2. Taking another deep breath, Idris kept the cursor down, inching forward slowly until he stopped right before a wardrobe. He clicked on it and searched through its contents in order to find something, but nothing. There was nothing useful. Pressing his lips together, Idris guided the cursor toward another part of the room, clinging to the hope that he might find something. Anything. He checked the drawer beside the bed, then moved to the small desk resting opposite it. His eyes scanned every detail, every corner, but no matter how thoroughly he searched, the room offered nothing. Instead, the more he looked, the rougher and louder the breathing behind him became, and as he moved away from the desk, he felt his ear shiver as the skin around his neck crawled. What the hell am I supposed to do? There's nothing, literally nothing at all. With the increasing tension, Idris also felt a sense of frustration. His previously calm emotions now started to run rampant as the frustration was starting to get to his head, making him less rational. In the end, his mouse once again fell on the leg of the bed, and he paused. The room fell silent shortly after as the breathing behind him stopped, and everything came to a pause. The signs were all there. No matter how he thought about it, he had to look under the bed. This was clearly the next part of the game, and yet, eyes don't want to. Looking at the bed, his heartbeat quickened. Bar thump, bar thump. It drummed so loudly that for a moment, Idris struggled to concentrate. I really don't want to look under the bed. I feel like it's a trap. I know when my guts are right, there has to be something else, another way. Biting his lips and feeling the sting, Idris once again pulled the mouse away from the bed frame. The moment he did, the breathing returned. Everything was as it was before. Or at least until a faint flickering sound echoed. Flick. The light above flickered violently, casting erratic shadows across the room. Idris's legs locked around the chair, muscles tense as his body braced itself. How? His breathing grew faster, unintentionally syncing with the heavy, rhythmic breaths of whatever stood behind him. Idris's hand shook as he moved the mouse, his face paler than it was before. The tension was at an all-time high, and cold sweat trickled down his back. His shirt clung damp against his back, but he forced himself to ignore the discomfort, pushing onward as he continued to move cautiously around the room, every nerve screaming in protest. It was just as he was growing desperate that he spotted something near the corner of the room, and his eyes lit up. This. Looking towards the wall, it was there that he spotted an arrow, and his eyes lit up. I knew it. I knew that it was a trap. A triumphant smile flickered across his face as he followed the arrow pointing toward the floor. There, a small gap between the wooden tiles caught his eye. Without hesitation, Idris clicked on it, pushing it slightly as a result, and revealing a folded piece of paper hidden beneath. Idris quickly read the message. I did it. I found a way to get into the room. She doesn't know it, and she will never know it. I left the clue right above. Where is it? Oh, right. On the ceiling, it's on the ceiling. Reading the message, Idris breathed a sigh of relief. He could feel it. The end was near. He was also certain that this was the correct message. Looks like all I have to do now is get into the room. The game is almost over. I should be done soon. Breathing another sigh of relief, Idris patted his chest. Easy, this was easy. Pulling the cursor away from the message, Idris brought it up towards the ceiling, thinking about his next set of actions. As he looked up, he was met with the sight of a blank white wall. Faint cracks spread across the wall as a small lamp hung up above. I don't see anything. Squinting his eyes, Idris tried to look for the clue that was left behind by the husband. However, regardless of how hard he looked, he couldn't find a thing. Or at least that was until... Crack. A sharp, splintering sound shattered the silence. Idris froze, heart hammering in his chest. Bar thump. Slowly, hesitantly, he moved the cursor toward the corner of the ceiling. All noise ceased. And then, he saw it. The tall figure that lurked in the corner of the ceiling. It clung to the ceiling like a grotesque spider, dressed in a dark suit and top hat. Its eyes bore into him, and that twisted, unnatural smile stretched wide enough to chill his very soul. Before he could react, it lunged forward, moving with unnatural speed. A heart-wrenching scream tore through the air. Breathing roughly, Idris stared at the monitor in front of him, his chest heaving up and down unevenly. Game over. Staring at the two words scrawled in deep red, he remained frozen for a few seconds before finally leaning back in his chair, snapping out of it. Holy shit. He took a moment to recall everything that had happened and his subsequent reaction. Then, slowly lifting his head, he stared at the camera. Thank God I'm not live. Had he been live then? No, it's best not to think about it. Taking several deep breaths, Idris tried to steady himself, but to his dismay, the panic refused to fade. His hand kept trembling, and his heart pounded relentlessly against his chest. What's going on with me? Why can't I calm myself down? Damn it. Taking several deep breaths, Idris tried to steady himself, but the fear refused to leave him. His hand wouldn't stop shaking, and his heart slammed against his ribs with every passing second. For whatever reason, he was reminded of what had transpired, and another wave of fear coursed through him. It took at least 5 minutes for him to finally calm down as he blankly stared at the game. This makes no sense at all. Why am I still so hung up on the game? It shouldn't be like this. He was someone who had ventured through some of the worst gates ever. How could he be scared of a game like this? Lowering his head, he glanced at the box of beers that rested beneath the desk. Damn it, it's because I'm drunk. That's the only explanation. Looking towards the camera, Idris put it on standby before drinking a bottle of water in order to calm his mind down. Then, packing around the room for the next several minutes, he sat back down on his chair and booted up the game. Again, he didn't believe for 1 second that he'd be scared this time. Not only that, he made sure to dim the lights around him further as he turned on the camera again. Okay, round 2. Since the cameras weren't live, I can just erase that video and treat it as if it never existed. I'll make sure this is the real video. Now that I know exactly what is happening, there's no need for me to be scared. Not that he was going to be scared even if he didn't know. He was drunk then, but he was much better now. All right. Pressing start, a familiar view came before him. I thought you wouldn't have come, officer. The familiar old lady's voice echoed, and for the briefest of moments, his hand trembled. However, he was quick to snap out of it as he clenched his teeth. Nothing, this is nothing. He kept mumbling the words under his breath as he restarted the game, his confidence shooting up with each subsequent room he passed. However, his confidence didn't last for very long. Later, by the time he reached the second floor, his entire body was drenched in sweat. His hand trembled, gripping the mouse so tightly it began to squeak under the pressure once more. Everything was the same. He was in the same room as before, and he no longer fell for the same trick as before. This time he was even more careful as his gaze hovered towards the leg of the desk. Clearly his thoughts were wrong before. The real message was under the bed, and he brought the mouse towards the bed. However, right as he did, he suddenly saw a shadow form right beneath the bed, stretching towards him, and his expression changed as he hastily turned around. Shit! But right as he did, a figure appeared right behind him. Idris's face changed drastically, but it was too late. Allah. Bang! His scream finally tore out as he tumbled back from his chair, his entire body trembling. He scrambled further away, eyes wide and quivering as they locked onto the massive game over, hovering on the screen. Impossible, this is impossible. He had been tricked again. Sitting up, Idris's trembling eyes settled onto the camera that was recording, and his face paled. It was right as his thoughts drifted back to the game, when he suddenly heard a faint trembling sound coming from his left, causing his body to twitch. Tiara. Hesitantly looking in the direction of the vibration, Idris found it to be his phone, and he slowly reached for it. It was there that he saw a simple message. It came from Jamie. It read, "So how was the game scary?" His face flushed red. Still no response. Looking at my phone, I was a little bit sad. It had been a while since I had sent the game over to Jamie, but I had yet to receive any words from him. I was probably being a little impatient, but how could I not be? I really was quite confident with my game. I had spent quite a lot of time developing, and if one managed to reach the end, they'd notice a nice little twist. But in order to do that, they'd need to get to the end. Oh well. I sighed lightly. I'll probably receive some feedback soon enough. I did think of giving the game to the exchange people, but they don't seem very friendly. In that case, should I have Kyle try the game? It was worth a shot. The last time I got him to play my game, it ended up in utter humiliation for me. This time, I was a lot more confident than I was before. Certainly, I'm sure he'll at least react a little. That was all I needed. Thinking about him showing some sort of reaction while playing my game brought a small smile to my face. I couldn't wait. With that being said, turning my attention to my laptop, I opened the app and turned my attention towards the new area that had appeared. In fact, it had been there for quite a while, but I had been so preoccupied with the development of the game that I never really paid much attention to it. But things were different now. Waiting to receive feedback from Jamie, I didn't really have much to do. In that case, I could now do other things. Like Lucky Wheel X1. I almost completely forgot this was a thing. This was one of the rewards that was included in the previous quest. I did remember getting a little excited about it, but given everything that had happened and where my priorities had been for the past several weeks, I had completely forgotten about it. Now that I was suddenly reminded, it was time for me to open up the reward. I wonder what I'll get. Opening the wheel wasn't very difficult. The moment I pressed on it, the screen changed, and a wheel of multiple colors appeared before me. The colors most likely indicated the type of reward, from items to software and so on. There were all sorts of things written, and a large button appeared right below the wheel. It read, "Start." 2. Letting out a few breaths, I pressed the button, and the wheel began to spin. Ti-ra-ra-ra-ra. It spun and spun and spun, alternating with all sorts of different colors as I stared at the screen in anticipation. Every second dragged for what felt like an eternity. Until it finally stopped. Holding my breath, I followed the arrow and read the reward. Yellow software. Mirror voice. What in the world? Mirror voices. Reading the name of the reward and noting the color assigned to it, I could tell it was a software. But as I mentally ran through all the available programs in the shop, none of them matched the one I had just received, Mirror Voices. In that case, this was a unique software. One that wasn't even available in the shop yet. My heart raced at the thought as I quickly looked down, where a pop-up appeared. Congratulations, your wheel has landed on a prize. Would you like to collect it? Play button yes, no. Yes. I didn't even hesitate and pressed yes. Immediately, the screen flashed white as the wheel disappeared, and I was brought back to the main app where I opened the game developing area. It was right there that I saw a new software added, and I immediately clicked on it to read its description. The moment I did, my eyes widened. Holy shit. This was massive. Mirror Voices. Type software. A software that is capable of recording and mimicking the voices of anyone who is playing the game. For the software to function, the microphone must be switched on. software can be applied to the game, actors. Non-consumable. Just one look was enough to make my heart race. All sorts of possibilities crossed my mind as I reread the description of the software. I can definitely make this work for the game I just developed. It wasn't like I hadn't thought of adding this feature to the game, but actually programming something like this was simply too difficult without a team. Not only that, but it wasn't like it would be of much use anyway. So what if I can make it so that the twisted man can mimic the voice of the person playing the game? That would only just creep them out a little. However, it wouldn't be enough to trick them into looking at the twisted man. This was fundamentally why I gave up on the idea. However, now that the software presented itself before me, my mind couldn't help but churn at all the possibilities that had opened up for me. But still, there was a fundamental problem that I had to address. How exactly could I trick a player with their own voice? If I get the twisted man to copy their voice, would it make them turn? No, it wouldn't. At the very least, I wouldn't turn. I wasn't that stupid. Then, how exactly could I trick the player to turn? What if I alter their voice? That would make them not turn even more. I already got the twisted man to copy the old woman's voice. I also already got it to copy the sound of objects, from creaking to other things. What else? What else? My brows furrowed as I mulled over the situation, but then I abruptly lifted my head, attracted by the muffled sound of footsteps echoing from outside. Then, to talk. I heard a sudden knock on the door, and I blinked my eyes. Who? It's me. The voice sounded rather tired, but it was without a doubt Kyle's. Tilting my head, I was just about to reply when the knob turned and he opened the door. I'm coming, Uke. Just a few steps into the office, Kyle's face turned ghostly pale. His hands shot up to his neck, as if an invisible force were strangling him. With bloodshot eyes he looked at me, his eyes filled with both shock and disgust. I merely nodded once I felt his gaze. Yeah, looks about right. The room had no windows or ventilation. Plus, with me having stayed and slept in this place for the past couple of weeks, I didn't doubt that this place smelled terrible. Take it as a lesson to never enter my office without getting permission from me. I did try to warn him before coming in. It was just a pity that he entered before I could say so. Kirk. Oh shit. Looking up, I covered my mouth. I slipped up without noticing. Herc. Glaring at me, Kyle let out a small grunt before stepping out of the room to take several deep breaths and entering again, his hand against his nose as he opened his mouth to speak. Bastard, what have you done to this place? This is a crime. His voice sounded rather funny. I shrugged. Like I said, ask before entering. That doesn't change anything. What have you done to this place? Did you kill a person? It smells like someone left a body to rot in this place. You sound like someone who has smell. Yes, I have, multiple times at that. Hello. Right. This job. It's not my fault this place has no windows and ventilation. Holding himself back, Kyle brought his face outside of the office again to take a deep breath before bringing his head back in. In the end, looking at me, he just shook his head. Whatever, this is not the reason why I'm here. He looked behind him. I'm here to talk about something else. It involves you to some extent. May, why would I be involved? I had stayed relatively low-key recently. I didn't think I offended anyone, and the section chief also appeared rather busy lately. So what could it be? It involves your most recent game. My most recent game? The hell, while I did tell him about my game, I didn't show it to him, or anyone in fact. The only one who had it was Jamie. Could it be that Jamie gave the game to Zoe? No, that wouldn't make sense. Zoe didn't strike me as a person who would be interested in that stuff. Then, remember when Rowan started screaming and that stuff? Something about it being due to your game. A small conflict occurred between them and Rowan, and well, it ended up being some sort of bet, with Rowan saying that they'd be scared. Huh. Oh wait. It was there that I recalled. Indeed, Rowan played the game. The others had also seen it. Right. That did happen. Don't worry about it, they didn't take the bet. They didn't look that interested in it. Wait, they didn't? Nope. Kyle shook his head. Like I said, they weren't interested. In the end, the situation ended there. No. For some reason, I felt rather disappointed hearing that. With Jamie not replying to me, I was dying to know how good the game was. It worked on Rowan, but would it work on people who were even stronger than him? I was really dying to know. Damn it, it would have been a great opportunity. I really felt like pulling my hair out at the moment, but with that being said, if the bet didn't go through, why was he telling me this? As if reading my thoughts, Kyle brought his head out and back in before replying. I just wanted to mention it since you might get asked about your game later. I don't know if it'll happen, but Rowan's reaction did make a few people curious. I see. Well, that's good. I suppose all the time I spent helping Rowan ended up paying off after all. Wait. My eyes sharpened as I looked at Kyle. Could it be? You want to try the game too? Well, Kyle scratched the side of his cheek, his eyes looking down. Seeing his reaction, I suddenly smiled and stood up, pointing at my seat. Please, the two of us are like brothers, Kyle. If you want to play the game, just tell me. Cuck. Oh no. I had to hold it in. Licking my lips, I looked at the laptop and was just about to boot up the game when Kyle's voice echoed. Wait. What? Was he having second thoughts? No, I couldn't. About where we can play the game, can we do it outside? This place is a bit. I paused, blinking before pursing my lips. Right, of course. I stood in silence, staring at Kyle, who turned his attention towards me, his face awkward as he scratched the side of his face. Is this it? I opened my mouth. Is this it? Is this it? I really felt like lunging at him and beating him to a pulp, but then looking at the monitor right before Kyle, and the glaring game cleared that appeared on it, I pursed my lips and felt my shoulders deflate. He didn't even flinch. The entire time, he cleared the game without so much as a change in expression. He did mumble things like, "Oh, I like this, not bad, kind of cool," but that was about it. He still cleared the game effortlessly. I had felt so confident in the game, and yet. Damn it, at least show me something. While I did expect Kyle to clear the game to some extent, I was still confident in what I had created. I was hoping he'd show some sort of reaction, but the fact that he showed nothing made me grow extremely worried. Did I overestimate the game? It can be just because it's Kyle. I mean, Rowan did show some sort of reaction. No, it was a great reaction, but will it be effective for other people? To what extent? I felt like ripping my own hair out in frustration. As if sensing my inner turmoil, Kyle looked at me. You know, I can just try again. Maybe next time I might get a little scared. I mean, I can tell that the game is definitely better than the previous one. It's quite good actually, unique even. The more Kyle praised the game, the shittier I felt. This also felt a lot like déjà vu. Right, he did say the same thing in the past when the first game didn't scare him. I clicked my tongue. This bastard. So should I? Do whatever you want. I waved him off absent-mindedly, my mind busy searching for any item I could buy from the shop to enhance the game. Whatever it took, I was going to make him react. However, regardless of how much I thought about it, I couldn't think of anything. Blank. My thoughts were completely blank. Maybe things would be different if the recording was more effective, but this is its limit. The recording was after all just a recording. It was the key piece required in most of my games in order to lower the guard of anyone playing the game. Things would be different if I had put a direct piece from the conductor, but right now, the conductor was the last thing I wanted to think about. Although there was still a little bit of time until my meeting with the conductor, it wasn't a lot of time. I think it's just about a month and a half. I really needed to think about how to assess that situation. Fuck, so many annoying things. Maybe I should raise the mouse a little bit, just enough to make me see the weird monster. That might make me a little bit more scared. Kyle was currently facing a predicament. Following the exchange with Rowan and the exchange members, he learned about Seth's new game and how it was supposedly scary. Thinking about Seth's previous game and how unscary it was, Kyle grew curious. Perhaps he had learned from then and improved his game. Maybe it could also now scare him. The thought made Kyle happy. If Seth managed to create a game that could scare him, then he was sure it was going to be a hit. Kyle wished nothing but success for Seth. But still, Seth's path was quite a difficult one. The demand for horror games was low because they rarely scared anyone, but low demand didn't mean they all flopped. In fact, a few horror games did succeed on a global scale, earning their developers a significant amount of money. It's just a pity that all those games are created using virtual technology. There was a limit to how immersive a PC and mouse game was. In order to reach the top, Seth would need to eventually start developing his own VR games. Only that way would he be able to truly create an immersive experience and tell the story that he wanted to tell. But that path was anything but easy. He'd be competing against gigantic corporations that could afford a team of developers, actors, and marketing funds. Kyle didn't see how Seth would be able to reach that point. In Kyle's eyes, the best-case scenario would be Seth getting scouted by one of those companies. By then he would get a good salary and do the thing he liked. Still, Seth was a long way from that goal. To reach it, he needed to create a game good enough to catch the attention of those companies. It was just unfortunate that he was still far off from that goal. "What are you doing?" Just then, Kyle heard a sudden voice and turned to see several familiar figures leaning into his cubicle. "Are you playing a game?" Zoe looked in particularly interested as she leaned close to check the game. "Oh, it looks like you just started." Zoe's eyes lit up the moment she saw the interface, but after a quick glance at the graphics and overall tone, her expression shifted. She seemed to understand something, and her interest quickly faded. "This is, Kyle paused and turned to check on Seth, but stopped when he saw him standing a little farther away, hands tangled in his hair. Was he trying to rip them? "Never mind. It's a horror game. I tried it, and I ended up clearing it." "Wait, I recognize that game." Just then, Rowan stepped in, eyes wide as he stared at the monitor before glancing over at Kyle. "Wait, so you managed to clear it?" "Ah, yes." Kyle scratched the back of his head. Well, it wasn't that difficult. In fact, it was quite easy. He just didn't say it out loud in case Seth heard. "It was a bit challenging, but I still managed to clear it. I was quite lucky." "You got lucky?" Rowan stared at Kyle with a complicated look. He was all too familiar with the game. Having played it himself, he knew just how scary it was. Kyle was just being humble, afraid of offending Seth or hurting his pride. And that made things the weirder for Rowan, who got scared by the very same game. Is he just different? How did he not get scared? Wait, if Kyle didn't get scared, then would the exchange members get scared? Rowan suddenly broke out in a cold sweat, feeling Kaylin's rejection back then to be a God-sent gift. What's this?" Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice the approaching footsteps until it was too late. A group appeared behind them, led by an all-too-familiar figure, whose gaze briefly locked onto Kyle and the game on his screen. "I was just coming back to check up on something, but you're playing games." "Oh, this." Kyle was just about to reply and tell them he was just trying Seth's game when he paused, his expression conflicting before he closed down the laptop. "I needed to relax a bit." "You guys sure have fun here, don't you?" Kaylin's eyes narrowed as he looked at Kyle. To be playing games in the middle of work, how low could this department get? Shaking his head, Kaylin was about to leave when his gaze fell on Rowan. Noticing Rowan suddenly look away, Kaylin raised an eyebrow. Curious, Kaylin tried to get their eyes to meet, but Rowan kept his gaze away, staring in a completely different direction. How strange, he was so arrogant before. Where did his arrogance go? Right then, Kaylin paused, and his gaze hovered towards Kyle's laptop and then Rowan. He alternated his gaze between the two until realization dawned on him, and his lips pulled into a smile. "So that's how it is. What must I realistically have to do in order to scare Kyle with a game? Do I have to get more software, or do I just have to improve the game even further?" The second game was certainly better than the first one. The storyline was clearer, and with each subsequent room that one entered, the tension rose. Obviously, the game was far from perfect. The storyline and the path were still linear. There was no real challenge in figuring out what to do next. Just enter the room, then find the clue. I understood this perfectly. and although I wanted to create nonlinear games, it was impossible for the current me. Just developing this game took me so much time. A nonlinear game would require a team or a lot of time. I had neither. Maybe if the second game is a hit, and I manage to get enough funds, but I'd still need to develop the game using the game developer system. In that case, how can I develop better games? The thought stopped me cold. I felt like I'd reached my limit. Even if I added more software, it would only improve the game by small margins. It wouldn't provide that qualitative jump that I needed in order to scare Kyle. Then what? What could I do? No, it's too late for that. The bet is off the table. A sudden voice snapped me out of my thoughts. When I looked up, I was surprised to see a group gathered around Kyle. Rowan, Zoe, Miles. Several familiar faces appeared before me. They all seemed focused on a particular group who were staring intently at Rowan. Some sort of conflict. I could see that the mood wasn't quite right. Now that I look closely, the group looks to be those from the exchange program. I couldn't quite remember their faces since I'd barely spent any time with them. Still, I wasn't completely clueless. I was still there when they introduced themselves, and as such was able to recognize one of them. With his black hair, pristine white uniform, and half-slanted eyes, he was hard to miss. Kalen, I think. Thinking back to Kyle's words, everything started to make sense to me. Why is it suddenly off the table? It wasn't too long ago when you were saying you'd bet 5 fragments if I got scared by the game. Like I said, the bet is no longer in play. What? Kalen said, a smirk tugging at his lips, suddenly not so confident in the game. That's not it. Rowan tried to respond, but Kalen cut him off, turning his attention back to the game. What do you mean it's not? That's clearly the case. Kalen chuckled. You thought it would scare someone because it scared you, but now that Kyle here wasn't scared, you're having second thoughts. Am I right? What about you? Zoe frowned, suddenly chiming in on the conversation. Aren't you only interested in taking the game because Kyle didn't get scared? If it wasn't for Kyle, you'd still be running away from the game. It's harder. Kalen suddenly laughed, looking at Zoe as though she was an idiot. The only reason I hadn't played the game was that I wasn't interested, but after watching Kyle, I realized 5 fragments are still 5 fragments. Who wouldn't accept such a generous gift? That's bullshit. Zoe suddenly chimed, her brows furrowing tightly as she didn't bother hiding her annoyance. If you had thought this way, you would have accepted the deal before. The same goes for the others. Zoe turned her head towards the other members, who were all staring at the scene with different expressions. Some looked bored, while others looked amused. Oh, we could participate. Suddenly, a girl with long white hair spoke. Hugging her spear, she tilted her head slightly, exposing her crystal blue eyes as she looked at Rowan with a certain glint. I would have taken the deal if we were allowed. Can't say I disagree. Another woman chimed in, her hand by her cheek as she looked at Rowan in disappointment. I didn't know we weren't allowed. What a pity. As others joined, the situation began to escalate. Watching the scene, my brow furrowed tightly. It wasn't so much because of the conflict. Rather, the more I stared at the exchange members, and then Rowan, the more a certain possibility dawned on me, and my heart couldn't help but suddenly race with a surge of excitement. Yes, that's possible. It can be done. If the opportunity presents itself again, I'd take it. Like he said, it's free fragments. Why would I give up free fragments? Same here. The mood plummeted further, and the tensions seemed to rise to an all-time high. Kyle, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly lifted his head to address the others and try to calm things down, but before he could speak, I stepped forward. Wait, HM. The moment I spoke, several heads turned toward me. Some faces frowned, others showed flickers of disgust. I couldn't blame them. I didn't exactly look my best right now. Who is this? One of the exchange members asked, looking back while trying their best to keep their expressions even. Ah, wait, isn't he the guy from before? Oh right, why does he look homeless? That, although it was true, it still kind of hurt. Kadam. Coughing, I tried my best to remain calm as I looked at the game, and then at Rowan. Actually, it's not impossible for you to play the game and still go on with the bet. Oh, HM. Finally, I seem to have gathered their interest as Kalen and the other 2 girls both looked at me. You're saying that the bet can still be taken? Wait, Seth, what are? I stopped Kyle and nodded. In fact, I can set it up so all of you can play at the same time. The bet stays the same. Everyone puts in 5 fragments. If anyone screams or so much as reacts, they're out. When only 2 remain, the remaining fragments will be split between the winners. How does that sound? As I spoke, I looked at Kalen. He looked to be the most interested in the bet. I didn't wait long for him to speak. So you're saying that all of us have to contribute 5 fragments, and what happens if none of us scream or make a single sound? You'll still get 2 fragments. As I spoke, I saw Kyle's eyes and the others widen. Their expressions clearly said, "Wait, why are you betting with fragments? You don't have any. What do you even need them for?" I ignored such stares and just looked at Rowan and Kyle. Of course, either one of them was going to chip in for me. I was poor. I didn't have any fragments at my disposal. That's HM. The faces of the exchange members changed subtly as they looked at each other. I could see that they were tempted. They even started to whisper amongst each other. Eventually, they turned to me again. The girl with silver hair spoke. "You said we can play together. How many people at once?" 3. Thinking about it, this was probably the best I could do. 3. The exchange members looked at each other before eventually a smile formed on Kalen's face, and he stepped forward, bringing his hand towards me. "We've got a deal. I'm in too." Same. 2 others joined in, with both of them bringing their hands forward, only to pull them back after getting near me. Even Kalen's face twitched once he got close enough to me, but before he could pull away, I reached out and grabbed his hand. Perfect. As I shook the hand, I tried to hide the smile that was threatening to form on my face. On the other hand, Kalen was trying his best not to wince. Win or lose, I didn't care. I had now found a use for the software I had just received. Multiplayer. And what better testing dummies than them? Thanks for watching. Please sub and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.